wishes he could have America's dick, bro. What are you talking about? Holy shit. Americans don't even think about the several countries we are bombing currently. Yeah, like just no, I can't even like begin to compare it. Like that's a crazy competition that every country will lose dramatically to.
In Mariupol that they have done until now. So it was a real act of defiance.
It's like funny to consider because this is the 20th anniversary of like shock and awe too. Like literally, just like we are so fucking gross, dude. Yeah, this is the 20th anniversary of the Iraq invasion. Yeah, like right now on this day.
And clearly getting the endorsement of having Xi Jinping show up for their 39th meeting since the two of them took over as leaders. That's pretty significant.
All right, David Sanger, always a pleasure. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
On my orders, coalition.
Iraq 20 years later, a changed nation and a terrible toll on America. Oh, man. So we're going to get to shock and awe in a second. Oh, I saw this. John Kirby and his takes on a ceasefire. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
That if coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire, well, that's just going to be unacceptable because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to.
Is wild because I've heard this verbatim from like random liberals in my chat. Like, what an incredible state of affairs when like I got libs in the chat saying John Kirby's lines verbatim, but for free. Like at least he's getting paid to say it. Like you're just doing it for free, man. That's crazy.
To plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing. We hope, and we've said this before, that President Xi will call and talk to President Zelensky because we believe the Chinese need to get the Ukrainian perspective here. That if...
Why does this not work on the other side? You're eating your fucking macaroni and you're telling me a ceasefire would be good for Ukrainians? A ceasefire would be good for everybody across the board. Of course, it would be bad for Americans. But ultimately, most likely won't happen. I don't think, because of sentiments like this expressed by the likes of John Kirby and everybody else. Yeah, he called you a noodle boy. First of all, I'm not eating a macaroni. I'm eating a salad. Get it right. Secondly, if peacefire or ceasefire, if ceasefire is good for Russia so they can re-up their armaments or whatever, why can't you say the same about Ukraine? Like, that argument is so fucking stupid. That's the part I don't understand. Where they're like, okay, well, you're pumping like literally limitless amounts of guns. You know, you can train the F-16 pilots in Ukraine in the meantime. You know what I mean? And galvanize Ukraine's defenses. Fuck you mean? Like, no, only Russia will benefit from it. Okay, I guess so. Well, they're getting their fucking dicks pushed, okay? Anyway, Americans are not as bad as Russians? What? What, like random citizens? The fuck do you mean? But this is such a stupid conversation to have. Like, I don't give a fuck. I don't know what context you are saying this in, but like ultimately it doesn't even fucking matter. If you were talking about like Americans justifying Iraq in the 20th anniversary of Iraq, you know, I got another thing to tell you. Anyway. You like shitting on people? No, I don't actually. I hate shitting on people. Unless they're like Republican mouthpieces, you know? L take from Hassan like Crimea prompted Ukrainian prep to prevent this war. Guys, if you think that like this is gonna come to an end anytime soon, I don't know what to tell you. You know, we'll just keep watching from over here. Do you hate being wrong? Not really. I think I'm a human being. I can be wrong. I have demonstrated that I have the capability of being wrong. So, anyway, look, for everybody who's saying that, you know, it's good that the war continues. It's good that the war continues. Like, okay, good luck. You know, it's not like what we say is going to change anything. You know what I mean?
And a ceasefire now, without a durable solution, would allow President Putin to rest and refit his troops and then restart the war at a time more advantageous to Russia. The world should not be fooled by any tactical move by Russia, supported by China or any other country, to freeze the war
This looks like a deep
on its own terms. Such a move would violate the UN Charter and defy, the will of 141 countries.
It's also fair to ask, how could this end any other way than a ceasefire? Libs just want to keep Russia bleeding at all costs. As far as polling in the EU goes, public sentiments have shifted to wanting some kind of end to the war. Yeah, of course it has. It's not that you're wrong, it's that you have no empathy for Ukrainians in this one issue for some weird reason. I do have empathy for Ukrainians. That's why I think a ceasefire is more important than like continuing fucking Russia's unjustifiable invasion. I think it's the empathetic position to take. It is not a sentiment shared by Ukrainians, but I think a ceasefire should come with conditions and also a process in which they talk about whatever territory Ukraine gets back in the situation. It is liberal brain rot to assume that continuing war is the more empathetic thing. You know what I mean? Ukrainians don't agree with me, but I'm right anyways. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of people that could fucking say that, Ukrainians ultimately have this, do not share the sentiment. But you're also not really thinking about what I'm saying here. Okay? While I don't think Russia would ever give back Crimea, a ceasefire and any kind of negotiation starting literally opens the door to that conversation of like Russian territory that is now expanded into further and further in beyond LPR, but further into Donbass especially, and possibly giving that land back to the Ukrainians. You know what I mean? These are all conversations that you could have when you're no longer shelling one another. Okay? These are not necessarily conversations you can have while you're currently shelling one another and while people are dying. You are the one who associates a ceasefire with like whatever the fuck Western media is telling you is going to continue making the... Yo, dog, I didn't know you were a CCP mouthpiece when I subbed. Oh, I'm sorry to tell you. I'm sorry to inform you, but, this is a Top G platform. Like, that's my sentiment on this. I said from the top, from the jump that, the Minsk agreements would have put an end to a lot of this conversation. And I think that ultimately that is literally looking like the best possible outcome that could have happened in comparison to what has happened thus far. But you can also make the argument that like, well, neither side wanted to fucking, follow through on the Minsk agreement, which is true. But if the big daddies got involved, China on the one side and the United States on the other, in a totally different world, in a totally different universe where the military-industrial complex is not our most viable and most important industry, and the United States does not care about, pursuing capital interests for the military-industrial complex, and they were genuinely in favor of, like, preventing senseless bloodshed, they would go for a ceasefire and then set the terms for Ukrainian emancipation, especially considering America's dick being bigger in the room. And, you know, there could be some reasonable solution that most likely resembles something similar to the Minsk agreement. But regardless, no matter what happens, one thing that I need everyone to understand is that there is nothing we say is going to change anything. You can get mad at me all you want, okay? But I think that even if you believe that like Ukraine deserves to get back Crimea, okay, an understandable position, sentiment shared by Ukrainians, okay. The only solution towards that is by starting off a ceasefire negotiation and getting to the table and having that conversation rather than fucking shelling endlessly back and forth. Do you get it? You are the one who claims to know what's best for the Ukrainians and their future. They have agency. We just say the Palestinians, they have to do a ceasefire in order to set terms of peace with Israel. This is such a gross example to set because the Palestinians are not getting an endless amount of fucking supply to fight back against the state of Israel. As a matter of fact, the same people are funding and facilitating Israel's evisceration of Palestinian people. So I don't know how you can fucking get away with even saying something like this without Allah smiting you from where you stand. If there was truly a just God, anyone that even tried to exercise the same level of processing power to put that word forward, even to talk about some of the most unjustifiable apartheid violence that is currently happening, that is totally normalized in the Western world, that no one even fucking bats an eye at, and then comparing it to like Russia's invasion, unjustifiable and inhumane invasion of Ukraine, where the very same military machine is also funding and funneling weapons into Ukraine, is insane. Like, it's just such a fucking stupid comparison. It blows my fucking mind. It's like, yeah, if my aunt had 4 wheels, I'd call her a fucking car type shit, okay? Like, crazy. It's insane. Yeah, if Palestinians and Israelis were engaging in the same kind of territorial dispute, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you oblivious to the reality? It is completely different. And also, on top of that, the funny part about this that Faustini would also agree with is that we don't give the Ukrainians everything that they want, regardless of how honest, how just, how normal, or not how normal their interest is in emancipation, right? It's a human interest to no longer have invaders inside of your borders. That is why I always say the Ukrainian cause is just. To rid the country of Russian invasion is a completely just and moral thing, okay? It is a moral demand. But we don't give the Ukrainians a nuke. We don't give the Ukrainians Article 5 privileges. We don't give the Ukrainians even F-16 so far. We probably will eventually, but not yet. They want all of those things. They want fucking NATO intervention, but we don't do that for Ukrainians. But I don't see you fucking complaining about that shit, being like, well, we're not doing everything for Ukraine. Turns out we do have limitations on how much help we can offer Ukraine. So why don't you go yell at your fucking, I don't know, why don't you yell at your government to make sure that we do those things so we can have nuclear holocaust so I don't have to fucking hear your dumbass takes ever again, like a ceasefire cannot happen because Television Man told me ceasefire bad, even though a ceasefire and then favorable terms for the Ukrainians would be the obviously best case scenario out of this circumstance. But no, you have to make like psychotic comparisons to fucking Palestinian emancipation as they are currently living under a horrific theocratic ethno-state apartheid state that is eviscerating their existence, where 1 million plus Palestinians live in the largest open-air prison called Gaza that's being endlessly bombed and shelled non-fucking stop by our weapons. And then the rest of them are also under occupation. That is, again, completely illegal. But nobody gives a fuck about international law when it's America or its allies doing the unjustifiable thing. Okay? There can be no favorable discussion for Ukrainians during ceasefire. This is fantasy. Fantasy or not, the fact that, both superpowers involved in this are not advocating for this endlessly is really fucking stupid. And I, as a completely powerless political commentator, I'm not going to stop saying that that is the right thing to do.
Please.
Also, yeah, I do agree that the United States should treat Palestine like they treat Ukraine. That would be fire, but that'll never happen.
Who have condemned Russia's war in the United Nations General Assembly.
HasanAbi, you're so wrong, bro. I didn't even say anything that is disagreeable. Like, that is the wild part about it, is that, like, I am literally saying that I would want favorable terms for Ukraine and Ukrainian emancipation in a ceasefire. And the ceasefire itself is, like, unimaginable to you because you live in Iowa. You don't give a fuck one way or the other. You go on Reddit and masturbate to war porn that's happening where, like, 18-year-old Ukrainians are getting fucking domed. And then, they're doing trench warfare, but that's hot for you. You know what I mean? You're just sitting there and jerking off. You're like, yeah, I feel like a cyber warrior when I put the Ukrainian flag in my bio so they can fucking die in some gray-ass, snow-covered, pussy fucking town. Yeah, I can't wait for another fan cam of, like, some dumbass 19-year-old Russian conscript that doesn't want to even fucking be there, that didn't even know what the fuck's going on, have a grenade dropped on him from a fucking UAV. You know what I mean? It's sick. Love that. No, it sucks. It fucking sucks. It absolutely is unimaginably cruel that ultimately the only one that is benefiting from this is straight up the American war machine, the American war industry. Why did you raise $250,000 for Putin, huh? Yeah, true. Remember when I did that for the LPR DPR recognition fund? Oh, wait, I didn't do that. I actually raised it for Ukrainian refugees. But hey, you'll never hear that from the fucking dumbass liberals that are just not interested in anything, but just interested in winning debates. All right. Now, speaking of our war crimes, this is a very important day in the history of the United States of America, but one that is probably lost in a sea of war crimes that we have engaged in over the course of the many, many years that we've been around. This is the 20-year anniversary of our shock and awe campaign. That is, how wonderful that we were just talking about how, like, that chatter saying, seems like Americans are a little bit, or seems like Russians are like just like Americans, but like maybe a little bit worse. Well, maybe you can make an assessment for yourself. It's going to be really hard for you to perhaps see the victims of America's war crimes in this regard as full human beings because they aren't, white. But just imagine in your mind, for the sake of this argument, that they're like Ukrainian children that America's doing this to, and maybe it'll, I don't know, maybe you'll develop like a different perspective on the matter.
Forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
We welcome you back to CBS Mornings with the moment that President George W. Bush announced the U.S. had invaded Iraq back in 2003, nearly 20 years ago today. The justification at the time that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Those weapons, of course, famously and consequentially were never found. And while Iraqi
Wow. CBS still running fucking defense for the American State Department is the best thing. I mean, this is the greatest example of that. Brother, everybody knows you lied on purpose. Why the fuck are you still defending them? Like there was ever a real weapon of mass destruction. At the time, The United Nations' own investigative teams openly stated that there were no weapons of mass destruction found in any Iraqi facility whatsoever. America, like, very openly lied about it. It's probably one of the most visible, most obvious, glaringly obvious fucking lies that the U.S. government has ever told at the international scale. There have been endless amounts of evidence for everybody knowing that it was a fucking lie, and yet for some reason, you listen to CBS Morning 20 years later, and they're like, oh, they were looking for it, but they were never found. Just fucking say it was a lie, you fucking asshole. Everybody knows.
Operation Iraqi Freedom led to the fall of Saddam's brutal regime. It also cost the lives of around 4,500 American service members and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians. Charlie D'Agata covered the conflict from the very beginning. We dug up the footage to prove it. There he is, 20 years ago. He's now back in Baghdad for this grim anniversary. Charlie, what a consequential moment in 21st century history. Good morning.
Good morning to you from Baghdad, a very different Baghdad than 20 years ago. When I first came here, people were still living in fear under Saddam Hussein. Then the invasion, the fighting, the rise and fall of...
I can't watch this. I can't. This is disgusting. Oh my God. Bro, I'm getting whiplash from watching Russia try to do like half as effective as like a military campaign as what America did in Iraq. Like, we watch Russian propaganda on this network all the time, right? On this channel all the time. We laugh about it because it's laughably bad. Okay? Meanwhile, this motherfucking piece of shit, this $400 haircut, okay, with no soul, this ghoul, this demon, is over here being like, yeah, people were so scared. Faustini, something we can agree on. Shock and awe was a disgusting war crime and nothing close to Russians bombing Kyiv. There you go. Even Faustini fucking agrees, okay? And it doesn't compare. Like, it literally doesn't compare. You can be the greatest natsec ass sucker, okay? But you cannot fucking turn around and literally refuse to recognize how devastating this shit was. Millions, okay? We murdered millions of Iraqi civilians. Millions. Holy fuck. Millions before with sanctions, and then millions after with direct bombing campaigns and a boots on the ground military invasion. We used depleted uranium munitions. We used white phosphorus. Just the absolute fucking, just the absolute worst shit you can imagine. Al Jazeera has much better coverage over this, but I'm like scared it's going to be TOS in this probably. Al Jazeera just like fucking lets it rip. I've heard people on the right even say the government lied about weapons of mass destruction. Yes. 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 This is like, well, it's already a fact. It's a very well-established fact. Which is why I'm surprised that like these fucking dipshits are even, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. They're just polishing it, you know?
ISIS. The violence has now subsided, but it's taken a horrific toll. 20 years since shock and awe. 20 years since that night, airstrikes and cruise missiles lit up the skies over Baghdad, paving the way for U.S. ground troops to converge on the capital. In the first few weeks of the war, a group of Iraqi civilians had gathered here and began attacking the statue of Saddam Hussein. It was an event that was shown live on TV screens around the globe. A U.S. Marine unit collared the statue, yanking it until it...
Bro, I'm fucking, this is so disgusting. For the liberals in the chat, this is literally the It's so funny that Putin is in Mariupol right now. Like, or Putin went to Mariupol. Because, like, this is the same exact shit. Oh, look how they're welcoming me in Mariupol. And the difference is, there are at least some, this is not justifiable, but there are at least some fucking people who are like, no, I am actually pro-Russia. There's no one in Iraq that's like, I feel American, okay? Because America is thousands of fucking miles away from Iraq. No one is like, oh yeah, we speak the same language. Thank God the American liberators are here. And if the Putin invasion of Russia, or fucking keep saying that, the Putin invasion of Ukraine is unjustifiable, which it is not justifiable, then the American invasion of Iraq is definitely not justifiable. Okay?
Toppled to the ground. The crowd beat it with sticks and shoes, dragging its decapitated head through the streets. It came to symbolize the collapse of the Saddam regime. In reality, the Battle of Iraq had only just begun. Saddam's removal sparked a ferocious insurgency and a bloody and prolonged sectarian conflict.
We've been through a lot. We saw some things no one should see. We lived days no one should live.
Ahmed al-Jabouri was 13 years old when the country was invaded. His wife, Muja, was 9.
What was it like here?
We were looking for something better.
Bro, this is so nasty. God. Oh, every part of this is so fucking gross, dude. This is really, 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 really fucking gross shit, dude. I don't. Oh my God, this is disgusting. Absolutely the worst level of fucking retconning. Just so scummy.
Being a Mandalorian is not just learning about how to fight. You'll have to know how to navigate the galaxy. This is the way.
Oh, it makes my blood boil. Guys, please explain like I'm 5. There is no explanation. They're doing every single thing that they always do whenever America invades a fucking country or has any kind of interest in a fucking country. They unjustifiably invaded Iraq. They knew that it was fucking bullshit. They lied to the entire international community. They went and they bombed the fuck out of Baghdad. They bombed so many parts of Iraq. Okay? They literally destroyed the lives of millions of Iraqi civilians. Okay? They used depleted uranium. They used white phosphorus, all of which are literal war crimes. And not only that, but 20 years later, they turned around, openly recognized that it was bullshit. Bush even had the audacity to fucking say, oh man, unjustifiable invasion of Iraq. I mean, Ukraine. Well, Iraq too. Like literally last year, and everybody laughed about it. Highway of Death was not this iteration. For those of you who don't know, Highway of Death was Bush Sr. That's how much we fucked with Iraq, okay? Highway of Death is not even this Bush that did what you're referencing. That's the old Bush. That's Daddy Bush that did Highway of Death. That's not even considered as like a war crime, even though that is precisely a fucking war crime. That was a war crime so gross and so obvious on retreating forces where there were men, women, and children, okay, pregnant women and shit, that we unloaded into, okay? The depleted uranium and its impact is still noticeable in Iraq because it has a higher rate of birth defects in Iraq to this day, 20 years later, than Vietnam. Another country that we absolutely had no business being inside of that we fucking destroyed. So to look at that, this false pretense that this war was justifiable and having the indecency to make it seem like it was an Operation Iraqi Liberation, Operation Iraqi Democracy, Iraqi Freedom, 20 years after the fact, when everybody fucking understands universally that this was completely unacceptable, okay? The fact that you are still running defense for something that George W. Bush himself personally recognized was bullshit, it makes my blood boil. It is so gross. It's so vile. Fuck all of these animals, okay? Every single one of these media demons deserves the absolute worst punishments. I cannot in good conscience sit here and act like these people are not violent, barbarian animals that justified and defended through one of the most popular forms of fucking media, the complete evisceration of the lives of millions of Iraqi people. And that is being like very conservative when I describe this. This is before we get to Abu Ghraib. This is before we get to like wanton punishments, cruel, unusual punishments that no one should have ever been subjected to. This is before we talk about the torture. And I don't even mean the torture that they defended that the CIA did at black sites that they considered a form of enhanced interrogation that was proven to be ineffective regardless, but it doesn't matter because cruelty was the purpose. I'm talking straight up torture that the U.S. military engaged in. There is nothing. These men, and there are a lot of veterans in here that also participated in this, who are fucking tormented by that experience every single day of their lives. But what these people did, what we did at the behest of the military-industrial complex in Iraq, at the behest of like securing natural resources like we always do. What we did back then is akin to Nazi shit, okay? If you want to understand it that way, you can understand it that way, I hope. Never forget that in the immediate invasion of Iraq, the only fucking ministry that was secured was the Ministry of Energy.